Hey guys, Tony here. Welcome back. IMAX reported Q3 earnings today, beating Wall Street expectations. And I thought it might be fun to take a couple minutes talking about IMAX for those of you that don't have a deep understanding of this company. We'll start off by talking about today's headlines. Surprise, surprise, they're not exactly correct. We'll go through the green, yellow, red dashboard talking about the financial health of IMAX. I'll touch on a couple of the key highlights from the earnings announcement today, and we will look at the stock history of IMAX, touching briefly on 2015 when it was trading over $43. What happened between 2015 and 2019 when it dropped, and then how did we get to where we're at today, 2023, trading just around $18. If you got a couple minutes to spare and you want to learn a little bit more about the key differences between IMAX and your normal cinemas, let's get started. Let's start off with this headline from CNBC today. Oppenheimer helps IMAX swing to a profit in the third quarter. And that kind of struck me as odd because, as I recall, IMAX has been profitable for several quarters. Let's fact check this headline. Let's take a look back at the previous earnings for IMAX. Now, keep in mind, we don't have the most recent quarter announced today here on this list. But if we scroll down and look at the earnings per share by quarter, we can see that Q2, Q1, and Q4, the three previous quarters before this one, all were profitable. So the only way that CNBC's headline would be correct is if they said year over year, comparing to Q3 in 2022. CNBC, you got to do better when it comes to reporting the movie industry. IMAX swung to a profitable quarter 4 quarters ago now, my friends. A quick overview on the financial health of IMAX using my green, yellow, red dashboard just to give you a picture of my assessment of the risk. We have a lot of green on here. This is what we want to see. This is just a quick visual reference for those of you that don't like to read financial statements. If you see a lot of green, that means that the company is probably in pretty good financial health. When we see a lot of reds, companies here like AMC, Rivian, ChargePoint, GME, that means that the company has something going on the financial health that means you need to pay even more attention, carefully understanding what's going on with that company and what is on the cash flow statement, the balance sheet, and the income statement. The more red and yellow there is, the more risk there is that the price is going to go down if things don't fundamentally turn around at the company. In the case of IMAX, things are looking pretty good, and we'll go through those highlights in the management presentation. Let's take a quick look at where IMAX's revenue is coming from. On the right-hand side of this screen, we have the global box office numbers for films shown in an IMAX theater, and that came to, in the last quarter, $347 million globally. And it's interesting to note that $130 million of that came from the US, $93 million of that came from China, and the remainder was the rest of the world at $122.7 million. I think that is worth mentioning because a lot of the cinema chains don't have exposure to this vast and growing market in China, and IMAX does. IMAX is operating in 87 countries, 1,651 locations, 400 of those in the United States and Canada, and 783 in China. A couple of things to point out on that footprint on this bar chart we have on the left-hand side, domestic, in the middle, Greater China. On the right, the rest of the world. The dark bars show the current installations. The light blue in the middle shows systems that are ordered and on backlog, so those will be additional IMAX footprint in the next year or so, depending on when they get those installed. The gray shows opportunities for IMAX to grow into unpenetrated locations. So there are more premium format IMAX screens coming. That is the blue in the middle of these bars. And there is a lot of opportunity, especially for rest of world. They only have 37% penetration in the rest of world market. If any of you saw the headlines that IMAX was up 96% on global box office and 51% on revenue, and were wondering why didn't the stock price just rocket up today on IMAX, when we go back and look at just the last quarter, the gain from quarter to quarter on box office was just under 8%. It was about 6% gain on revenue, gross margin up 8.5%, and adjusted EBITDA was up 36%. All very positive, but just keep it in perspective that the numbers that are reported by IMAX and the media were from a year ago, not quarter to quarter, Q2 to Q3. That is not in any way meant to minimize their results. We all know the movie industry is recovering almost back to pre-pandemic levels, and IMAX gives us guidance today that they expect to have 1.1 billion global box office for the year 2023, back to the pre-pandemic levels. I want to talk with you about where IMAX generates their money because I think that's an interesting topic, but let's look at the movies that made Q3 successful for IMAX. In Q3, we had Oppenheimer and Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning. And then over in China, they have Creation of the Gods, the first installment of the biggest budget Chinese trilogy production. 2 more to come. 2024 looks to be promising for IMAX as well. I'm not going to read all of these titles to you guys. You can read, but you know some of the titles on here. Dune Part 2, Deadpool 3, Quiet Place Part 3, Venom 3, among other names. Okay, let's get down to the nitty-gritty, high level on IMAX's Q3 earnings. That 347 million global box office translated into 103 million in top line revenue. Gross margin on that after we take out the cost of the revenue was $62 million, giving common stock shareholders a net EPS of positive 22 cents per share. Some of you will also see IMAX and the media reporting positive 35 cents per share. That is down here in pink. That is the adjusted earnings per share. Keep in mind that is non-GAAP reported earnings. And the key difference between that 22 cents per share GAAP earnings and the adjusted earnings, non-GAAP, of 35 cents per share is due to executive share-based compensation. That does show up on the income statement and SG&A, but since it is not a cash transaction, IMAX chooses to tell you that they have an adjusted, when they back that out, adjusted earnings of 35 cents. While we are talking about revenue, I thought it might be interesting for you to know, where does IMAX's revenue come from? And in this far right-hand column, we have Q3 revenue. You can see up here at the top, 347 million. That was the total global box office. And as we know, down here in the right-hand column in green, the revenue that IMAX generated off of that box office was $103.8 million. But where did that $103 million come from? 2 buckets. The first one in yellow, Content Solutions revenue, was 44 million. And in orange, I highlighted the Technology Products and Services revenue, and that was $56 million. So Content Solutions revenue is where they take movies and they remaster them into the IMAX format. The $56 million Technology Products is the sales and leasing of IMAX equipment to theaters. They do sales, they do 10-year leases to theaters, and they have maintenance contracts also. That contributed, of that 56 million, 14 million of it was maintenance contracts on the IMAX equipment. It really is a beautiful system because IMAX can stay very asset light, and they have that recurring revenue from these leases and maintenance contracts. And for my OCD subscribers who want the numbers to add up, let's not forget the all other revenue bucket, $3.5 million. Moving over to the balance sheet, just very high level, a couple things to point out. IMAX has 109 million in cash and cash equivalents, 135 million in accounts receivable, 125 million in financing receivables. Total assets comes to $850 million. Moving down to liabilities, they do have 228 million in convertible notes. Those are due in 2026. If I recall correctly, they do have some capped calls to hedge for those convertibles, limiting any dilution risk to shareholders. I think that the effective strike price on those is around $37. Total shareholders' equity to common shareholders is $287 million. down here at the bottom. When we add in the borrowings from the revolving credit to the convertible notes to get our total debt, and then divide those out to get our debt to equity ratio, that's about 252 million divided by 287 million, or a debt to equity ratio of 0.87. So let's go ahead and update our spreadsheet here. Summarizing IMAX's cash flow, 9 months, operating cash flow, $55 million positive. Here is that debt on the right-hand side that we talked about on the balance sheet, the bulk of it due in 2026. The other thing that I like about IMAX is that they have been repurchasing shares for several years. You can see on the left-hand column in 2019, shares outstanding was just over 61.1 million. And with those repurchases, since 2019, shares outstanding is sitting just over 54 million shares. So about 10-12% have been bought back. And we can see here in the right-hand column that the average repurchase price on those shares is just over $15. So IMAX has been taking advantage over the last several years whenever the price dips to go into the market and buy those shares up, returning shareholder value. If you stuck around this long, I said in the beginning of this video that I would talk about why IMAX fell from the $43 level in 2015 down to where we're at now, around $18 and change here in 2023. Let's do that real quick and then I'll let you go. IMAX was on a great growth curve up until 2015 with revenues peaking around $375 million. They might hit that now in 2023. But the issue that happened with IMAX is the cost of that revenue grew and the operating and profit margins took a hit, a big hit, from 2015 through 2019, and that cratered the price. Then you had the pandemic in 2020, which didn't help. Now, on top of that, in 2020 or 2021, I forget when it was, they added the $250 million or so of convertible debt. So there are a couple of operational things that IMAX is going to need to work out to regain their former glory. But as the company continues to grow and expand their global footprint, we will have to see if they tackle those. And that will be the key to IMAX price going up. I see here there are 10 analysts covering IMAX with a range of prices between $14 and $30 for their 12-month price target. Average is $23. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. What do you think about IMAX? Do you own any IMAX? Do you think these analysts are on target with their forecasts? I am Tony Denaro. Thank you for watching, and I will see ya on the next video.